Now that we've gone over some of the basics of motion design, I wanted to introduce two other really valuable tools, which are Null objects and the graph editor, both of which are used in this example that's on screen, which we'll be recreating in this video. Null objects in their simplest form are a separate layer that you can link individual layers to and control overall properties. And then with a graph editor, you can adjust keyframes to give them a little more personality than just linear movement. I came across a really great example that not only showcases these two elements, but inspired this project that we'll be putting together from the account Digital Archive on Instagram. You're going to notice in this example that each line of type is animating up and together collectively, but then as I scroll through, these groups are animating independently from an anchor point that looks like it's probably right at the top of that line of type. You'll see the same thing happen as I scroll through for Mexico City and so on and so forth. And I wanted to build something somewhat new, but drawing inspiration from this. And I've also been really inspired by the Nike Just Do It campaign, but the new iteration that is Why Do It, that's using this typeface. So even for a mockup, I'll typically do a bit more research to get a better sense of the imagery that's being used in a campaign, the typography, and just generally some of the elements that can build and make this feel like it's cohesive. I also pulled up this Nike Why Do It video that they put together when they were releasing the campaign. And this is actually a really great opportunity to go over a helpful tip when you're doing motion design, which is on YouTube. You can use the shortcut for the greater than and less than symbols on your keyboard to go frame by frame through a video. In this particular example, the type animation is actually a hard cut at the very end, so it doesn't matter quite as much. But when you start getting really into motion design and you want to dissect other people's work to understand how they're animating certain things, this can be really helpful. One of my favorite examples for this is Vox. I can go through frame by frame and see how they're animating these more complex animations. So to get started, I pulled a couple different references and elements that we'll be using in recreating that video, including an example of the type, the Nike logo as a PNG, and additionally this really great photo of Shelly Ann Fraser Price. Just ignore the Puma logo for this example. To start, I want to find a font that resembles this one that they're using for the campaign. And Adobe has a really great tool, which is a visual search for type, where I can take an image and just drop it in. Let it scan to identify similar typefaces that are a part of the Adobe font library. Just move this box out to get the single line. Click next step. I'm just going to type out the message so it can detect the characters. And then click next. I ended up already downloading this owner's X Narrow Black, and so that is now in my Adobe software. So now that we have everything that we need to get started, I'm going to go back to After Effects, and we'll start from the very beginning by creating a new composition. And then for the width, I'm going to make this one a 4x5, so I'll do 1080 by 1350 for the height. I'm going to keep it at 30 frames. We can reduce this duration a little bit later, but I'll just keep it as is for now, and then everything else looks good. I'm going to click OK. It's good to stay organized, so I'll typically create folders and organize things as I go, and I'm just going to drag it into this main comp folder that I've created. If you want to create new folders, you can do that by going down here and just clicking New Folder. And then you can always drag and drop, so you can have nested folders. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. Now that we have our new comp, the first thing that I want to do is to create the text layers. So if I go to the original mockup that I created, and I just scroll through, you'll notice that each one of these words is animating and scaling up from its center. And the way that we can do that is by going back to our new comp, and we'll create 3 individual layers of type for each word. And I already have my owner's X narrow font that we got from the visual search. Once you click download, it'll automatically load into your Adobe suite. So I'm going to create the first text layer. I'm going to go up to the type tool and just type out the word just. And I'm going to use this layer for the other words to make sure that they carry the same properties. So I want to make this layer as close to this example before I start duplicating it. So to start out, I'm actually going to just get the selection tool and I'm just going to drag it into the center a little bit more so I can see it better. And I'm going to click the letter S and I'm going to unconstrain these proportions. Just drag this so it's a little bit more vertical. This is a quick and dirty way to get a little bit closer to this. And then I'm going to reconstrain those proportions so when we scale it, it doesn't start to get wonky. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that it doesn't scale from the bottom like it just did. I want to make sure that it scales from the center. And I can do this in two different ways. Without a plugin, you can do it by clicking this layer and clicking the letter A. And then you can just drag this property to get in the center. Or I'm going to plug a plugin right now that I use all the time and I find extremely valuable, which is Motion 4, which allows you to just click this button and it'll automatically do that. And this is from a company, mockup. So now that we have this first layer all set up, I'm going to duplicate it and create the other words. So I'm just going to do Command D twice, and then I'm going to type those words out. And then I'm going to do the selection tool and I'm just going to drag these out. And I want to make sure that these are center aligned, so I can select all of these layers and go up to Align. And I'm going to switch it to Composition and then do Align horizontally. And then I'm going to switch this to Selection and I'm going to distribute them evenly, vertically. And let's quickly see what that looks like when we're scaling from the center. I'm going to select all and click S. Looks pretty good. I want to make sure when it scales, similar to this example, that it takes up the screen pretty evenly. So I'm going to go back to our comp, scale these down just a little bit. And then I'm going to move this up a bit, this one down a little. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so the original example, it starts off small, and then it goes roughly 15 frames forward and it animates to take up the screen. So I'll go back here, and with all these selected, I'll just activate these stopwatches to create our first keyframes. And I'll slide these roughly 15 frames forward, and then with all of them still selected, I'll slide this to the left. Start off small, and then they'll animate up. Now that we've created these three layers that independently scale from their center, I want to animate them all together, moving up and off frame, and then introducing another set of just do it coming from the bottom. And that's where we can create our first null object. I'm going to go down here, right click, and do new null object. And before we go any further, I'm going to title this by clicking return or enter and titling it scroll motion. And I also like to change the label color so it's a little bit easier to see in contrast to these other layers. I'm just going to change it to green. And now all we have to do is link these layers to this one layer, which is our null object. So I can select all of these, and there's two different ways that we can do this. We can use what they call a pick whip by clicking, dragging, and dropping on our null, and you'll see that it links here. Or if I do Command Z and go back, with all of them selected, you can go here and you can select from this drop down. So now, if I go to the null object and let's say I click P, I can now click and all these will move together. And that's our first null object. So to get ahead of us animating on the graph editor later, one thing I'm going to do to start is go to position. I'm going to right click it and go to separate dimensions. This is going to come in handy later when you want to have more control in the graph editor for individual properties for the X and Y. But to start out, I'm just going to put a keyframe here. And then I'm going to go forward a bit, and we'll fine tune all of the keyframes a little bit later when we get to the graph editor, but I'm just going to drag this to the left. And if you hold shift and drag, you can move things a lot faster. So I'm going to do that. So we can see these words. I'm going to go up here to our magnification percentage, and I'm going to drag it to the left. And you'll see the bounding boxes for these words. And I'm going to click and select all of them, and I'm going to do Command D. And then I'm just going to drag these up so they're all together. And similar to the null object, I'm going to change the color on these so they're pretty easy to see. And then I'm just going to click, hold shift, and I'm going to drag and position these pretty much in the center. It doesn't need to be perfect for this, but because these are already linked, now when I drag to the left, you'll see that it already animates in the way that we want it to. So I'm just going to play this back. That looks pretty good. If we go back to the example and scroll through, you also notice that it's an outline version that comes in and then it fills in a little after this Nike logo comes in. So let's add that in now. I can do that by selecting all of these. And then if you click UU in quick succession, you can bring up the source text properties really quickly. I'm going to select that. So that's our filled keyframe. And I'm going to go a little bit forward. And I'm just going to click this swap so we get an outline version. And you can change the stroke width here. Probably do 4 or 5. I'm going to select all of these, and I'm just going to drag them a bit to the right. I'm going to add the Nike logo now. I can click, hold, and drag it either directly down here, which will start it at the beginning of the timeline, or I can drag it directly onto the timeline to where I want it to start. So I'll just drag it right here. And it's a black PNG, so you can't see it with a black background. But if I were to go down here and click the toggle transparency grid, you can see it here. I'm going to add an effect called fill. Under generate, and I'm going to drag and drop it on here. It automatically changes to red. I can just go over here and change that to white. I'll toggle this back off. And then I'm going to click S. I'm just going to scale this down. Next part of the animation is animating the just and it, so they animate off screen. So I'm going to recreate that. Going back to our comp and go to the word just. I have position already brought up by pressing P. I'm going to separate the dimensions again, so we have that graph editor functionality. And I'm going to do the same for it. Just P. Separate dimensions. And then these will both be on the X position. Go forward a few frames. And then I'm going to click, drag, and hold shift. And just animate that off screen. Same thing with it. Click, hold shift, and just drag. I'm going to try to make it equidistant from the edge of the comp so the animation is roughly the same for those. So now if I play this back, it should be a majority of our text animation. We'll fine tune those keyframes in just a moment. I'm now going to add our photographs, which if I go back to the original, those come in roughly when this type scales up and resolves, so we'll recreate that. Another thing, if you don't want to see keyframes, if it's taking up too much of the screen, is you can do Command A and then click the letter U. If you click it once, you'll bring up all of your keyframes. If you click it again, it'll hide all of them. I'm going to go back up to Project. Then I'm going to drag this photograph. And I'm going to do a similar thing to what I did with the type, where I want to sequence individual layers all together, but control them with a null object. So I'm going to click this, click S for scale, and I'm going to scale it down to roughly the composition size. And then I'm going to do Command D twice, and then with Shift being held, I'm just going to drag this up. Doesn't need to be perfect, but select this one. I'm just going to cover this frame. Hi. Now that I have those 3 photographs positioned roughly where I want them, I'm going to right click again, do New, Null Object. I'm going to drag this down here. Same thing, I'm going to retitle this by clicking Return or Enter. I'm going to call it Photo Scale. And I'm going to give it the same color as the other null object. I'm going to click all 3 of these, go to the drop down, and do Photo Scale. So now all of these are linked, and I can click S on this null object, and I can scale all of these together. So if we go back to this mockup, start off with it taking up roughly the entire screen. So I'm going to do that here. And that was roughly at 15 frames. So I'm going to click the stopwatch, and I'm just going to scale this up to roughly the same frame. And then it goes forward a bit to roughly right here, and it scales down. So you can see more of the image. And then towards the end, it scales down. So you can see all 3 photographs. Another thing that this original mockup has is all of these layers start at the 15th frame. A way that we can do that is by selecting all 3 of these and holding Option left bracket. If you were to go forward, you could also do Option right bracket, and that'll close on that frame. But we're going to have those continue, so I'll do Command Z. Okay, now that we've set the general direction of our layers and motion design, we want to add a little bit more personality to it. So if I were to play this back, you'll notice it's sort of bland. All these keyframes are linear, so they're all consistently moving at the same exact speed throughout these 2 keyframes. And this is where the graph editor comes into play. It's located right here. The first thing you need to do is select keyframes. So if I were to select these and then click the graph editor, you'll see that the motion is just a line. To get started, I want to have these 3 words just do it, ease into that scale change. And the easiest way to get started doing that is if I were to select all of these keyframes, right click them and go to Keyframe Assistant and do Easy Ease, and then go to the graph now, you'll see that there's this really nice curve. And if I were to play this back, you'll see that already it just has a lot of really nice motion. And something I'm going to do, I'm going to unclick the graph editor. I'm just going to select these ones on the right. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to drag these out even more. And this is where you can personalize it even more. The other thing that I notice when I play this back is that this upward motion happens really quickly after this resolve. I want to give it a little bit more of a pause, so I'm going to go and select these keyframes on our scroll motion, null object, and I'm just going to drag them to the right a little bit. And similarly, I want there to be an easing motion on these because, again, if I play this back, it's just linear. I can either select these keyframes and do what we did before, which is the Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease, or we can do the shortcut, which is highlighting them and then doing the Function key and F9. And now if I play this back, already there's a little bit more personality to that. And I'm actually going to drag all of these keyframes a little bit to the right, just to give it a little bit more breathing room in our animation, because I want it to sit a little bit longer on that. That looks pretty good. And similarly, I just have this keyframe selected. I'm going to go to our graph editor. I really like to drag these out for these types of animations. It's trying to look better. Now I'm going to ease the just and it so they're a little bit smoother. So I'm going to select those keyframes and do function F9. And for these, I'm going to slide these two keyframes to the right. So that's a little dramatic. And these ones have a slightly different motion from what we've been doing with the other ones. If I go back to the original and I select these, click U to bring them up. These are the keyframes for the ease to the left and right. I have them selected. I'm going to go to the graph editor. You'll see that it's a much more dramatic curve, so it eases out and then eases in a lot more. So I'm going to select these keyframes on the left, hold shift, I'm going to drag them out a bit more, and then I'm going to hold shift and click this one as well, and then hold shift as I drag them. And that gets it a little bit closer to what I originally created. I'm going to make this a little bit longer as well though. It's looking pretty good. So now we're going to animate the photographs. And if I go to the original and I click on one of these keyframes in the graph editor, you'll see that this one is quite a bit different from even what we did in the previous ones. And this is where it's important to note that with the graph editor, have fun with it, experiment, really make it your own. So I'm going to go back to the original, click U to bring up our keyframes. And I'm going to zoom into this comp a little bit more, and you can do that by pressing plus. And then another little navigation tip for your comp is if you hold H, you get a little hand tool and you can drag. And then I'm going to select these three. Click function F9 to ease them. I'm going to recreate that motion that was on the previous animation. So ease a little bit more into this. This keyframe was actually more linear where it starts off, and then this was a much more dramatic curve. And click out of our graph editor. So now if I go and do fit and play this back, that's our motion design using Null objects and the graph editor. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment and I'll be happy to answer it. Thanks so much.